happening now. We want to welcome our viewers from across the United States and around the world. This is the EdTech Situation Room. Good morning, good day, good evening. This is EdTech Situation Room, episode number 323 on April 3rd, 2024. My name is Jason Neiffer, and I am the Executive Director of the Montana Digital Academy, Montana State Virtual School, located on the beautiful University of Montana campus in fabulous Missoula, Montana. And joining me tonight from all the way across the United States and beyond, good evening, Dr. Wesley Fryer.
Good evening, Jason. I'm glad to be joining, and we apologize for being a little bit late. We're dealing with a few different technical issues, as sometimes comes up. StreamYard is remarkably robust and resilient, but I think you may need to quote Pink Floyd or something with the wall there behind you tonight. But I am a middle school STEM and media literacy teacher here in Charlotte, North Carolina, and excited to be talking about the tech news. Did you all get some of this storm that just sort of barreled across the country, or were you all spared?
Well, yeah, I think we did get some of it. It did dump rain here yesterday, which was kind of weird because, Monday it dumped rain, but then it was super nice in the afternoon. And yesterday it dumped rain in the morning, but then in the afternoon it was 70 degrees. I think it was our first 70-degree day for this year, which is awesome. But it's definitely springtime here, but more and more that's turning into kind of liquid sunshine, as opposed to kind of a regular old spring, especially in western Montana.
But with the snowpack down and everything, you all are still probably bracing for a fiery summer.
That's absolutely true. Yeah, I think the last time I heard a story on it, it was still historically low snowpacks. So yeah, that's a little rough. But we're doing our best to kind of keep an eye on the weather and make sure that the state doesn't go up in flames.
Yeah, well, the tough sides of climate and changing weather. So, well, what are we going to talk about? Because it's been, hey, we're all up to date on the website, which is always good. That's not something we can say all the time. But I heard we were going to do more than weather tonight. Just a rumor.
Yeah, so Wes and I combed the internet all week long looking for interesting stories that we think might have some application to technology and education. And tonight we have stories across the technosphere, as it were, including, of course, some AI stuff, some security articles. We have a little military update, some social media stories, copyright and intellectual property stories, and one tonight on our Geeks of the Week. And Dr. Fryer, thank you for getting the bulk of our links going tonight. Where shall we start in tonight's news dump?
Okay, well, I'm liking covering some stuff before we jump into the AI world. I will comment though, and we could talk about this offline too. I would love to find another time to maybe do an AI playdate online. I participated in my third one this Monday, and that is part of the TIP Teachers, which is associated with the University of Washington's Center for an Informed Public. And it's all about media literacy, but we did just a 3-person panel, sort of, where it was just a quick little brief intro into 3 different tools. And then we went into breakout rooms, we played, and we came together and shared. Man, that is a strong model. Just having someone with a little bit more experience with some tools. It gave me a chance to play with Copilot a little bit more than I have done before. And one of the things I learned was that Copilot will keep the archive, and it has a shareable archive, like ChatGPT does, but it'll do it for pictures as well. And interestingly, ChatGPT doesn't do that. But anyway, there were a bunch of different things that we learned, and that was just wonderful. But anyway, maybe we'll hold off on the AI. Let's start with security. I'd like to start with this AT&T article. This comes from TechCrunch, and the headline, this was from March 30th, is that AT&T resets account passcodes after millions of customer records leak online. And we frequently talk on the show about some different, hey, this has been hacked and this security breach occurred. This one affects not only active AT&T customers, but also historic ones. And so the numbers here are pretty substantial. 7.6 million current AT&T account holders, of which I am not a member because I've been a T-Mobile subscriber and a very happy one for probably over a decade now. But it also includes 65.4 million former account holders, which I do include myself in because I had AT&T for quite a while. And this was a PIN reset. And so probably beat this. I don't know. Maybe we haven't beat this drum a lot recently. So let's beat it tonight. We should be using unique and complex and long passwords on every single website. They should all be different. And the only way to do that and remain sane is to have a password manager that you use. But the PIN code is something that perhaps people may repeat in multiple places. And if you ever had a PIN code with AT&T, it's now on the dark web. And so this was a pretty big black eye for AT&T. But you know what? Companies deal with this stuff all the time. They'll just promise to give you a year of, whatever it is, monitoring or whatever, which I think is, I don't know. I think that's probably about useless. And then they just move on with their business. So it is incumbent upon us to make sure that we are taking care of our own selves and our families when it comes to password security. And this is something that I've got to look at addressing, because just like a lot of us back in the day, I used the same password tons of times, repeat, and those repeated passwords are on the dark web, and I would be a fool to use those anymore. PIN codes are not something that I paid as much attention to, and so this is something that I need to pay attention to, and everybody does who's ever been an AT&T customer. So, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I just keep thinking about in terms of I took advantage of a T-Mobile deal a couple months ago and was able to pick up an extra line for nothing. So I put that as a second eSIM on my kind of Play phone, which is an Android phone that I kind of use to experiment with. And it's a new number to me. And at some point I may get rid of it or transfer to a family member or something. But right now it's just kind of a Play line. And I get no less than a dozen scam text saying bank account this, bank account that. And the particular scam that you're talking about is a more complex scam than that, but we are being inundated right now with security issues. And a good example of this is that my organization is often a target of text scams, where members of my staff will be purportedly to be from me, asking if they're available to help out with something. And of course, my staff wants to be helpful. Luckily, they all double check through things and aren't pulled in by such shenanigans. But the bottom line is that it's a pretty complex world out there, and I just don't think well, obviously these scams must work because the increase in them suggests that they're effective in getting the targets that they're looking for. But if you happen to be tech savvy and your family is not, don't delay, right? It's really important to talk to your family about this, offer to be a resource in case a member of your family is targeted with one of these attacks. And they're just going to become more complicated and more onerous in the time of generative AI. And I will say the quality of text, scam text that I have witnessed recently is much better than it was even a year ago. And I think in my mind, a lot of that is due to generative AI. So, I think it's really important to stay safe and thoughtful about how you go about various processes. But make no mistake, it's a dangerous world, and the consequences could be epic and impact you the rest of your life.
So let's do a couple more security here. And I just dropped this one in. I forgot that I had seen this, and then anyway, I just added it. Wow, I have not seen this one, but this is from Mac Rumors. Before I talk about it, I had mentioned on the show a few weeks ago that we were thinking about a refinance. We're not doing that. But oh my gosh, we are continuing to get all of these phone calls as well as text messages, related to that. It is obscenely ridiculous to think that you're going to make a phone call. And this was to my existing, mortgage company. And then suddenly that trips a switch that leads to literally hundreds and hundreds of messages that we've gotten on our phones. I mean, we could probably do research about this, but I've read in the past, there has been some talk about the next generation phone system, We need the next generation phone system. And sadly, we've talked about it. We're stuck with email because it is ubiquitous and it's been around forever, and it just, so to speak. And I just don't think email is going away. We just have to have, better tools to be able to deal with spam and security issues and everything. And I think that the phone has been the same way, but oh my gosh, it has just been horrific. Anyway, I had to turn off my silence unknown callers this week because of a phone call that I needed to get from somebody who I didn't know. And just immediately I started to get the calls, and it's happened all the time. All right, so this is one I had not heard of before. This is coming to us from Mac Rumors, but the original source is Brian Krebs from Krebs on Security. This is from March 26th, and the headline is, "Warning, Apple users targeted in phishing attack involving rapid password reset requests." I had not heard of this, but what happens when we are trying to log into a new iOS device with our Apple ID is that you'll get pop-ups on your other devices. Could be iPad, could be laptop, phone. And so what the attackers are doing now is they're trying to log in, but hundreds of times. So you're being overwhelmed on all your devices with these things. And then in the midst of that, they're going to hit you with something else that you're likely to click. One of the people interviewed for this article who has suffered one of these attacks says that he could not use his devices, his iOS devices, or whatever, iOS, Mac OS, all of his Apple stuff, until he clicked don't allow for more than 100 notifications. So I would expect Apple to address this. I don't know how much of an outlier kind of attack this is. This appears to be more of a spear phishing attack. I don't know if this qualifies, but it's just not a random thing. Like they're trying to log into your Apple ID, but these kind of things can be automated. And so you don't have to be, Colin Powell or, running for president in order to be the victim for something like this. So anyway, everybody's got to take security more seriously. And maybe part of what I need to think about doing too is just revisiting some of those kinds of opportunities I've had in the past to help people who are not in my immediate sphere to be able to think about password managers, because I don't know what the percentage is, but I think it's probably still fairly small that folks are following the password advice that we're talking about and that we're trying to follow here. So have you heard of that attack or seen that?
I think I read that same article. And what's super interesting about that is that, that is taking advantage of people's frustrations, right?
Yeah.
Like I could see that being absolutely a situation where your phone is exploding, or if you are in a situation where you can't be distracted by your phone, in the middle of class, in the middle of a conversation with someone that's serious, or even over dinner, where you might, out of desperation, just start clicking anything for it to turn off. And of course, I like the way Apple does two-factor authentication. I think it's a smart, pretty savvy strategy. But the bottom line is that that's a good way of hacking that strategy. And I find it all to be, just generically pretty disgusting for sure, but make no mistake, these are mistakes that could end up becoming, lifetime impacting mistakes.
I don't know if I've admitted this publicly on the show before, but at the time we were arranging for the payment of our house, and I was going to have to wire a considerable sum of money, and you can't take back a wire transfer. I was feeling like I had this big target on my back. I did have a situation with a phone call where I did share something, and finally, you get the text message, "Do not share this code," and I'm like, ask him another question. But when you are under stress, when you have a lot of things going on, when something hits you at the wrong time, you can respond poorly. And I do consider myself to be a relatively savvy person when it comes to security stuff. So, it can happen to any of us. And, these are things that we need to be talking with our family about, our significant others. But we've also got to be just really wary ourselves, especially if you are in that kind of situation. Even this is where talking about it in advance and almost rehearsing can be helpful, because if you find yourself in a stressful spot and you're having to click a lot of things, I think probably it's just like stop, and wait and just be careful, because those are times of high vulnerability. if we don't mind, there's just two more under the
Yeah,
security
let's do.
headline. Hackers, it says from NPR on March 13th, are targeting a surprising group of people, young public school students. And this is actually from one of the affiliates in Georgia. But the article, let me drop it in here, basically outlines why ransomware attacks are such a effective thing on schools. We've talked about hospitals and other things, but this was Minneapolis Public Schools, hit with what experts describe as one of the most, this is quote, devastating cyber attacks ever. Hackers stole district data, including files where children were identifiable, then demanded the district pay a ransom for it. When they refused, they released the data online. It included social security numbers, school security details, information about sexual assaults, psychiatric holds on students, basically the most confidential information that is possible to have on students. Minneapolis Public Schools did not respond, but it had sent written notice of the attack to more than 105,000 people who had been impacted by it. And the article says, and we probably understand this without reading the article, as districts depend more on technology, cyber attacks against those systems and the sensitive data they store are on the rise. It says that a study found that in 2022, there were 45 districts reporting, and that doubled to 108. But that number has got to be way bigger than that.
Yeah.
So again, if you are responsible for cybersecurity, I was just visiting with a friend who is a technology director at a school I will not mention, but they had just, I think they were working with CrowdStrike, but they have just, signed a contract and basically getting as serious and as practiced as they can, that all of their data is protected, that they have insurance, and that they have a plan so that if this happens, boom, they call a phone number and it's not a mystery of, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? Because I would go so far as to say this: if you are in a large school organization, and we'll just leave that ambiguous to say large, you absolutely have a target on your back. And so if you have not been affected by a security breach of some kind, it's just a matter of time. So
well, and I would say, and I know I've said this in the past on the podcast, but I think it's an important point to make. Most student data is relatively low value data, and the stuff you mentioned is certainly terrifying that any student's data would be released in that way. But that's part of the point, right? Like, you don't have to abuse that data very aggressively to make a real mess out of someone's life, and more importantly, create terror amongst parents and school leaders. And I think that's the point here, right? And I have been increasingly listening to chatter about cybersecurity. I do think that it is maybe the most important issue. I do think also we vastly underfund professionals in schools, right? Like, I think that to be very frank, the folks that run IT in schools are really heroic and oftentimes vastly underpaid into what comparable skill sets would happen in the private sector. But at the same time, it's their tush on the line. If they're managing, let's say, 250 devices, which would be a relatively small school, and probably in charge of everything else too, including the Bell system and the HVAC computer and all these other pieces, that's a lot of pretty extraordinary things. And we rely on these people more and more, right? That they are oftentimes managing well above what the private sector would expect in regards to the numbers computers managed by a person. And in a lot of cases, they're paid well under their market counterparts. And I just think that's something we need to be very thoughtful above. And I can't believe we're already saying this, but there are so many lessons that I feel like we're starting to lose from the pandemic, not the least of which is it's a good thing to have one-to-one devices in schools, but you have to have people to manage it. And I think that's why you're seeing some schools move away from that, or not able to maintain those systems because they're not investing in the folks that are keeping the computers safe. And I just think that's a pretty short-sighted mistake. I don't blame schools as much as I blame policymakers there, right? Like, we should be vastly expanding education funding in part to help put devices in kids and teachers' hands, but then secondarily make sure those devices are well maintained, and are able to be updated and stay with recent technology for no other reason than for safety.
I'll say part of the good news that I discovered as a tech director for 4 years was, outsourcing and the fact that there are all kinds of companies, that are able to really do a much more capable job and a 24/7 job, for instance, managing servers and patching servers and doing a lot of things. But budgets are limited. You've
Yeah,
got to figure out what you're going to be supporting. And in schools, sometimes we hold on to things for a really, really long
yeah,
time. And the thing we've got to realize with AI is that just as there are exciting possibilities, and I'm sure Jason and I can both, share numerous new stories about AI and things that are going on, because it's super dynamic and it's amazing what we can do. These tools in the hands of bad actors are pretty scary, because it is an amplifier, and it's an incredible amplifier. And I don't think it's a linear amplifier. I think it's an exponential amplifier. And so when you consider the target surface of the school district in terms of how many users and user accounts and devices and Ethernet ports and all these kind of things,
yeah.
it really is kind of overwhelming. So, okay, last security article. I would not know probably anything about this if it wasn't for Dr. Neiffer, but we talked, I'm sure, over a year ago about this thing called the Mirai botnet. And in the last 2 weeks, I talked to my kids about denial of service attacks. This is for my coding class, what it is, how they work, and just some different aspects of this. And so this is an article that I found, was actually from May of 2023. And it's from IEEE Spectrum, and it's called "The Strange Story of the Teens Behind the Mirai Botnet, the DDoS malware that threatened the entire internet." And it really does read like a spy novel. It's incredible. It started with a kid at Rutgers who was mad that he couldn't register for his computer science course that he wanted and he was a freshman. But he brought the Rutgers network to its knees, and then eventually, it leads to them releasing this software that took advantage of hacks of Internet of Things devices, and then other bad actors got a hold of this, and then this thing just exploded, and it literally almost brought the internet down. So it's been a while since this has happened. I think that this story is an example of sort of like digital security cultural literacy. Like, everyone who's involved in cyber, and it's not just cyber, like, we are living in the day of the Internet of Things. All of the devices that are in our houses can be hacked, right? Everything that connects to the internet can be hacked in some way. And so this story is compelling, it's interesting, it's crazy, it's wild, it involves Minecraft, but it's one of those things that I think is valuable to know about ourselves, and it's also something great to talk with students about, especially if we're teaching any kind of computer class that's going to touch on safety, that's going to touch on coding, web design, any of that kind of stuff. So how are you feeling about your Internet of Things security? You're
Well,
pretty much Apple strong, or you're still this mixed, some
we're,
Amazon, some Google?
we're moving more towards Apple, but what I would say though is that I am hesitant now to plug in anything that doesn't have a very trusted brand name for me. And Apple is, I guess, the good news in this case in regards to Apple is that Apple is snobby enough that that they don't they don't license HomeKit out to just any other Tom, Dick, or Harry corp to put out an Internet of Things device. But yeah, I mean, I have tried to move towards segregating my Internet of Things devices. I have a separate network available as part of my router that is intended to be for Internet of Things, that where it can't access anything else. So at least I know my computers are safe from that. It wouldn't prevent the botnet scenario that you're talking about. But I just think it's a very strange a time we are in for sure. And, there is just a lot of cruft you can buy on the internet that seems like it's a pretty good deal, but it's, Amazon is full of really kind of bizarre devices that probably work. It's not a question of them working or not, but if it introduces other things into your network or in your security, then that's problematic for a variety of reasons.
With default passwords that
Yeah.
are oftentimes easily guessed. And so something I would just say to this that makes me think of is we need to consider how often we're updating our main hardware.
Yeah.
I have been looking at I don't know, I won't even try to say the name, but I've seen it as an ad, of course, because I'm interested in this stuff on Facebook and Instagram, but it's a stronger firewall for your home devices. And so having something like that might your router now that connects your cable modem, your high-speed modem to the internet should be receiving firmware, and it should be relatively new. But that's really your main defense against a lot of different kinds of attacks. So anyway, it's something it's very interesting, right? Because where do people get this updates and this training? Everyone sort of assumed that, oh well, you'll handle your own IT, but I don't know if anybody's library out there is having a thing on home internet security or whatever. I haven't seen anything like that in our community, but this kind of stuff is important. And again, there's all these different entry points and problems, and the basic place to start is with passwords and PIN code and pins and all that kind of stuff, but multiple layers to the security world. So thank you for letting me dominate the topics here for the beginning and go through the security. What would you like to do next?
Sure. Well, why don't we go in and jump into some AI articles and see where that leads us. So there is one article I didn't have time to throw in, and I did see some interesting conversations on LinkedIn about it today, but you are now able to access ChatGPT without creating an account. And did you grab an article on that by chance, Dr. Fryer?
I did not, but I'll put one in because I saw that as well, and that's significant.
So first and foremost, that did lead to a little panic today, and I think that's a little short of the right response, in part because Copilot has been available without an account for some time now, and Copilot actually offers ChatGPT 4 access, where ChatGPT 3.5 is notably behind ChatGPT 4. And it's the version that you can just get to go back and forth on. And it doesn't do a lot of the cool stuff that comes with it, yada, yada, yada. But I think that the point I want to make with this is that I keep feeling like that a lot of folks want to deal with AI with an easy answer, right? Well, it doesn't impact kids under the age of 13 because you have to be 13 to sign up. Well, now you don't even need to sign up anymore. Or kids can't get these accounts, or they need their parents' permission, or there are some states that are pushing more aggressive means of account creation in order to try to deal with COPPA and the other child safety laws. But the bottom line is that it doesn't matter at this point because no account creation is required for a serious number of these tools. And I don't want us to panic about artificial intelligence, but at the same time, I think that it's foolhardy to assume that there's going to be an easy click solution to this, or I'm not going to have to deal with this from an educational standpoint because I deal with elementary school students, or I deal mostly with middle school students, or my students are only in the age of 13. Students have access to these tools, whether you like it or not. And if you're in a building that has free range cell phone access, that's a whole nother debate right now. And that one's been firing back up again with the recent release of a book. I do think that we can't ignore the fact that generative AI is probably sneaking into our classrooms, whether we like it or not. I don't come with easy answers yet either on the more positive side of this. So, I think a lot of more discussions required, but I think we need to be exceptionally careful before you dismiss the possibilities and even threats that the generative AI brings to the environment because of the sheer number of students that now have access to this because of that.
This isn't an easy answer, but it is a clear what do we do right now? And
Yeah.
I think everybody needs to be going to a play date and having a play date and
Yeah.
using it, because it is almost useless to hear. I'm about to say it's useless to listen to us, but no, it's almost useless to go to a workshop where you're just hearing people pontificate about AI and you are not using it yourself, and you are not using it to ask questions about things and give prompts that touch on things that you have knowledge about, because it'll be more insightful for you to validate or verify, or to say, well, wait a second. The article I dropped in on this was from TechCrunch on April 1st, and it's titled ChatGPT no longer requires an account, but there's a catch. And the catch, they say, is that all your chats go into their training data, which is really, really interesting, right? Because we've talked about this before, that we as logged in ChatGPT users up to this point are not officially sending and giving our data to OpenAI. But if you don't log in, you are. So actually this benefits them, right? Because they're going to get additional data. I would expect there to be those limitations. Last semester in my web design class, where I had students, figure out and tell me, hey, we can use, Microsoft's Bing AI without logging in. Yes, you could, but you couldn't do a whole lot. And when you logged in, it was better and it was more fully featured. And what I discovered Monday in doing this Tip Teachers AI Playdate online was that you can't create images with the Bing AI with Copilot, which is Microsoft, unless you are logged in. So, it's with all of these tools, we've got freemiums, try this, and there's so much money being spent in this. And then was it Diffusion AI? I don't know if we have this article, but I think, didn't their CEO resign, or there was some kind of upheaval? I think they talked about that on Hard Fork. But there's going to be some sorting and sifting that's going to be happening with these companies. But yeah, we can't ignore it. These tools are being used. And on the good side, they really can bring some huge benefits to us, both personally and professionally. But it is a wild west out there. And, if somebody tells you they have the answer and just do this, buy this, and it'll tell you exactly which students have used AI,
Nope.
don't buy it, because
Nope.
that is whatever the phrase is for, selling you some kind of mixture that's not going to be medicinally effective.
Yeah, and I also have a bridge to sell you too. And the other note too, that I just think it's important that, don't get me wrong, and what Dr. Fryer's advice is spot on. If you haven't yet started playing with these tools, I think you're diminishing your opportunity to understand them, to start wrapping your brain around them. And what I have experienced over the last year or so, for sure, is that a lot of smart people don't get this because they're not playing with it, and it's not a fault of their own. It's because the media is doing a fairly terrible job of covering exactly what AI is. And what I can tell you is that, I've talked to people who are otherwise very well informed about technology, that until they sat down and saw a demo of it and started to have their brain pushed a little bit into that direction, weren't able to articulate what these tools even did. And that's a problem, right? I think about it this way. It's funny because my mom, who, to be clear, is no slouch on computers. She was doing computerized bookkeeping in the early 1980s, before most computers were in a home. And the reason why I was exposed to technology early is because there was a computer sitting in my house in 1982. And I'm not even talking about like a cool computer like a Commodore 64 or one of those computers. I'm talking about a CP/M based K-Pro 4 was sitting in my computer. That's some high-end nerd stuff right there, right? And I used to play Ladder, which was a popular game on CP/M. But the bottom line is that, in context of understanding these tools, my mom, in her 74 years on the earth, is better to able articulate this, because she sat through a couple of demos that I've done with teachers. And I've talked to people who are engineers that aren't able to get there yet, in part because, and if you haven't tried this before, go type artificial intelligence in an incognito window, and get a Google search. So it's kind of doesn't have your search history in it. And I'll even tell you what that is. If you go to artificial intelligence, you get something from a site called Built-in that says what is AI. You get artificial intelligence in Wikipedia. You get IBM's what is artificial intelligence. You get the SAS Institute's what is artificial intelligence. You get the Motley Fool's article on what is artificial intelligence. You get Britannica's artificial intelligence article. You get Tech Target's artificial intelligence article. You get Google Cloud's what is artificial intelligence. You get Investopedia. You get MIT artificial intelligence. You get Coursera. You get McKinsey and Company. None of these are generative AI tools, right? And so if you just type in artificial intelligence, which is the word people are using, to describe these tools, and computer scientists will say that generative AI is not really artificial intelligence. Yes, but that's not the point. The point is that there is a knowledge gap amongst a lot of otherwise engaged professionals because you need to play with the tool. But my broader point before I got into this rant a couple minutes ago, back in the last hour before we started, is that it doesn't replace the conversation we have about education either, right? I don't blame people for doing 10 ways AI saves time for you sessions at conferences. I don't blame folks for doing that. I think it's important to get that cognizance, but also understand that that's not enough, right? And just using them to improve your workflow is an interesting start, but I think that this calls into question a lot of our sacredly held beliefs in regards to education. And I don't say that very often. In fact, I haven't, if anything, I've been kind of disappointed in what technology has brought to classrooms in regards to, our sacred conversations for sure. But it's not a foregone conclusion that AI changes things in education. But I feel if we don't tackle it, the changes are going to happen outside of us, and that we're not going to get much say in that. And I think that's a real problem for education, and particularly for teachers.
The other thing I'd say as well, in addition to playing with it, is that we need to tell stories about it.
Yeah.
And I don't know, did I tell about the Rotary talk and the one at my dad's retirement
No,
community?
I don't think you have. Please
okay.
do.
So I don't know if I'd shared that or not. Okay. So you've got aicentrist.com. I just went ahead and made a subdomain Google site, ai.wesfryer.com. So that are the slides and links for 2 presentations I gave during our spring break in Manhattan, Kansas. And again, this past Monday with the tip teachers, it just reinforces this. Like, we need to process change. As human beings, like, AI is so much faster than our evolutionary change, right? We've taken thousands of years to get to where we are right now, and AI is on this exponential, change curve. So something else that we need to be doing is telling stories about it. And I really did, have positive experiences visiting with people. We had some live demos that was valuable as well. But I think that we need to share our experiences. We need to encourage others to as well. That AI story sharing can be a good part of a playdate experience. And I think that there's a lot of things that we don't know, but these are things I do know. And I know that in times of rapid change, there's a lot of fear. There's a whole lot of big feelings that people have. And one of the things that helps with that is processing it and talking about it and telling stories and also just sort of building our models of like, oh, really, you did that. And those are constructive, specific things that can be done. So I've been toying with trying to come up this summer for your conference, Jason. And I just I don't know. I don't know. Well, here's the good news too. Yes, if we get together virtually or face to face and do this, it's fantastic. But like before December, I had never done an AI Playdate at all, and I'd never done one over Zoom. I've done 3 now, and they've all been great. And literally, you can have 3 people or 4 people in the room, and it can be fantastic. In fact, if we had tons and tons of folks, you just have less interactive possibilities. So I think that those are good models, and we need to keep encouraging people to tell the stories and to play and to be a part of the solution. Because part of what you're saying, like, in order to understand this and grasp this more, we've got to play with the tools. And if we don't, we're missing out on the conversation, and everybody's busy. But like, it's like saying, oh, the printing press is here, but I'm still going to keep writing on papyrus and just orally communicating. I'm going to forget this thing called the printing press. Literally, I think it is that seismic.
Yeah. Oh, and to be clear, I've said almost the same thing, right? And I always put it in historical context because I'm a history teacher by training, so that's how I kind of approach the world. But yeah, I don't think we've seen anything that this dramatic. And to be clear, we could be wrong about this, right? It could fizzle out. There could be a bubble. So it's not like we've. Yeah, I mean, it's not like we've drinking too much Kool-Aid here for sure, right? Although Kool-Aid tastes delicious, but the bottom line is that um, the internet was a huge change, but that really happened over a series of decades. AI is going to be as big of a change, in my humble opinion, but it's going to happen in a series of months, in the same way that it happened over decades with this. And again, I do think it introduces extraordinary chaos into knowledge work, but it's by no means a foregone conclusion that this will be negative. But it's only negative, I think, if we just choose to ignore it or we choose not to adapt and embrace these technologies. And to be clear, I am really scared about what this means for education. I do not think that because an AI can do something, it means that humans should stop having to do that. We know too much about human development. We know too much about why it's important to learn write essays, why it's important to engage in critical thinking. And I think this can enable a lot of cool things. But just saying that we don't have to learn things because AI can do it for us, I think is a vast mistake. But yeah, it's a big deal. And to your other point, Dr. Fryer, I do think conversation is more important in the AI world than it ever has been in teacher professional development. And just sitting down with your colleagues, I think matters quite a bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, how about a couple more AI articles? We did start a little bit late, so we've still got about 20 minutes, even
Yep.
though the time we were just a little delayed starting. So
Sure. Well, I think there's a couple articles on here about the fact that Amazon has dumped several $billions into Anthropic, which is the maker of Claude, which I consider to be one of the best, if not the best, large language models. And it's really interesting because the fact that Amazon is investing money in this established tool tells me that they are perhaps less convinced that they'll be able to come up with their own models themselves, right? Although I think everyone that has a play here, including Microsoft for that matter, they're investing in several models as well, but they also have their own research going. I think a lot of tech companies are hedging their bet. But I love Claude and I love Anthropic's approach on the world. I also love their notion of constitutional AI that they're trying to build some protections into. And I would also note too that I think if I had to give up all my current subscriptions to any of these tools, then I think I would keep Claude over the others.
wow, over ChatGPT.
Over ChatGPT, yeah. And now, to be clear, it's something that part of it is that I think at some point I'm going to get access at work to ChatGPT 4 because we're working on using it as an experiment for a department at the University of Montana. We're having to go through some procurement discussions because that's a lot more complicated than it used to be. But the bottom line for me is that it's just a really excellent model, and its wide context window, which means you can upload lots of pages to analyze, is super great.
Okay, so on that note, let's I'll get another AI one that touches on Anthropic. I don't know if you had seen this one. This is from April 2nd, yesterday. Anthropic researchers wear down AI ethics with repeated questions. Now, what the heck does this mean? Well, because of all that context and how much basically these large language models can hold in temporary memory, what they found is that if you just basically continue, they're calling it mini shot jailbreaking, and they wrote a paper about it. Basically, they can get it to go outside the guardrails of what it's supposed to do, whether that's teaching somebody how to make thermite or doing something else that a bad actor is going to want to get information about. That this is a quote hack that is effective, and they don't know exactly why and how to counter it. And one thing I'll say about this is good for Anthropic for publishing this, right? When we talk about a 0-day exploit or these other kinds of hacks, one of the issues can be that some people know about it, but they don't tell the community about it. And then it's out there and bad actors are utilizing it and it's not being patched, et cetera, et cetera. It is absolutely fascinating to me how when you interact with these generative AI models, like it literally feels like we are interacting with a different intelligence with it's not like it's a full human that has all the critical thinking and logic and everything else, but it has exceeded our capabilities in many ways. I mean, hopefully you think, favorably about Dr. Neiffer, but he is not going to ingest the entire web. He has not read all of Wikipedia. He has a great mind, but he is not going to be able to do that. But these AI tools have. And so they've already exceeded our capacities in some ways. And it just really is wild to me, emergent behaviors, emergent kinds of things that we weren't expecting. And I think this kind of fits into it too. Like, why does this work? Because, it's important to have guardrails and to try to keep these things, quote, safe. But unfortunately, what I think this shows, and I think we're going to continue to see this, I don't see this changing. It's the same cat and mouse that happens with security for any kind of devices, whether it's the iPhone, Mac OS, a Linux server, whatever. We've always got bad actors trying to find vulnerabilities and then exploiting those. And that's happening here with these AI models as well. But yes, kudos to Anthropic for being able to, not being able to, for making the choice of trying to have constitutional AI and for creating such a powerful tool. I don't know if we covered the article, but there was one in the last couple weeks, I think, that talked about Claude exceeding ChatGPT 4 Turbo in terms of its capabilities. And it was thanks to you that I played with Claude. It's the first one I've used that let me upload a file. You can do that now with ChatGPT. But, I took a Kindle file that I made into a PDF that I bought. But I was able to say, hey, I need a summary of chapter 3 and the 20 vocabulary words and discussion questions, and it does it in seconds, and it's really good, So Claude impressed me, the heck out of me, probably a year ago, and I probably need to go back to it again, especially hearing that it's, your favorite and it's one that you don't want to part with.
So that of course reminds me of the fact of it was a year ago in February when Kevin Roos from the New York Times first had access to Bing, what was then known as Bing AI, and was able to, over a series of conversations, get it to basically suggest that it was sentient, and also hit on him to a point of suggesting that he leave his partner for what was known as Sydney then, because that was the code name that they utilized. But I think the important part of this that's maybe not talked about is that Microsoft has dealt with that by limiting the exchange you can have with Copilot, right? I think it's after 20 back and forths, they just say, we got to move on to another topic. And unlike ChatGPT, Copilot, which is built on top of ChatGPT, will force you to start over if you start to kind of walk into its scary sense, right? Or ability to do too much. So, think about that as you may, right? I wouldn't have any comment about how that works or why that works. But the bottom line, though, is that this is what's weird about AI, and this is also something that you have to experience to be able to wrap your brain around. But this happened to me the other night. I had a YouTube video that I was considering, or that I was considering to watch, but it was an hour long, and I didn't know if it was going to cover what I wanted to cover. And so I regularly use AI now to sniff through transcripts of YouTube and do a pretty good job of telling me what's in there, so to see if it's worth my time. And I'm giving a presentation tomorrow at the statewide Exceptional Children event in the state. And so I'm going to be talking about how AI can help in context of special education. And as it turns out, there was a couple good webinars on it that I wanted to see if what I had already created was legitimate. And ChatGPT wouldn't do the work for me. Even though I asked it very clearly in a prompt that I'd used before, it just didn't do the work for me. And that's weird, right? And the fact that it has rules and you can talk them out of the rules, which I've done several times now, is very strange. And if you ever have the opportunity to do what's called red teaming is trying your best to hack something so that people can know if it is hackable or not. I am going to be helping a couple of different folks that are trying out some homegrown solutions, and I'll be doing a little red teaming as part of this. But if you get a chance to do that, just being weird with it, copying and pasting, large groups of text without instruction, typing the same sentence over and over and over again can get unpredictable results with some of these large language models. And those are the types of safety testing we need to be doing.
Some of the literacy development that we need as adults, as teachers, and as citizens is prompt construction, prompt engineering. One of the comments that came out of our AI Playdate Monday with tip teachers was just teachers saying, I just don't know where to start. And so like seeing others and then together, like, well, what should we do? Well, let's try this. Well, what do you think? What do you want to ask? And then I showed some custom GPTs as far as the more detailed instructions. My dog's starting to bark. No. That was helpful to people because that sometimes people just are not sure where to start with this. Let me share another related thing talking about red teaming. This comes from the Stanford Internet Observatory, and this is an outstanding article. And I think Jason and probably many of our listeners will recognize at least one of the authors, Renee DiResta, along with Josh Goldstein. The title is, this was from March 18th on 2024, How Spammers, Scammers, and Creators Leverage AI-Generated Images on Facebook for Audience Growth. And it talks about Shrimp Jesus, which I hadn't heard of before. I listened to the Hard Fork, and Jason and I are both like basically disciples of the Hard Fork podcast now, I think. But the ways in which image generation, video generation, and bad actors have a little bit intersected, but are ready to explode is just super, super important. And so this is an article by some very well acknowledged academics and internet researchers. And this is going to have to become part of what we're doing in every class in school. We're going to have to help people realize that you cannot trust your eyes. You have to interrogate the media. And the prevalence of AI created media is just going one direction. And so anyway, commend that article and also the fact that this points to curricular change that we need to have in our institutions and in our schools, because this is stuff that is vital to not be taken in on and tricked by. Unfortunately, media literacy is not going to solve the whole thing, but it needs to be part of what we're doing.
Yeah, ain't that the truth?
Okay. Well, we got about 10 more minutes, so we've got time for a few more articles. What else do you want to cover tonight?
Yeah. So why don't you talk about the first impressions of Sora?
Okay. So this is from OpenAI, and this is on March 25th. As you may know, and this is something I think I played. I didn't do this for the Rotary, but for the retirement community, I just played the Sora video just so people could see them and to talk about. The article is basically OpenAI sharing some feedback that they got from their community to further improve their model. And of course, what I'm kind of bracing for is like, is this going to be released to the public before the election? Like how is this going to be playing into the election? So some of the comments, which are in large print, Sora is at its most powerful when you're not replicating the old, but bringing to life new and impossible ideas we would have otherwise never had the opportunity to see. Talking about not the replication of the real, but the surreal. They've got a couple different videos. I didn't watch all of these, and some of these are funny and silly. In a way, I kind of think some of this, because this is on the very creative storytelling side, these are all like creative directors and digital artists and things, and they saw what they could come up with. I mean, it really speaks to the positive of this, but the job side of this, the bad actor, faking things. what it is going to do on a positive side, and maybe Dr. Neiffer, one of us, can use AI tools to create this, but I have wanted for some time, and of course this is going to be interesting in terms of like hopefully not having something inappropriate come up, but let's say that we're able to create this, being able to give a presentation, and then behind you or as part of your slideshow, here are images, because that's a lot of times what I do with slideshows is I try to come up with related images to what I'm talking about. And so being able to do that with not only images, but full on video, being able to create videos that have all kinds of amazing related B-roll style videos that, are related to what you're talking about. I'm very excited about that potential and that possibility. But again, this is one of the things that people may have missed. Things happen fast, right? And if you're missing Sora and the fact that these tools are now able to generate pretty amazing, realistic video, that if you weren't told in advance this was created with AI, the videos that you're going to see on this article, you will, because they're surreal, they're storytelling. I don't think maybe anybody's going to be tricked by these, but that capacity today is really stunning. And again, the capacity is just going to get better. So any thoughts you have about Sora and the video side of generative AI?
Well, I do know that another article was making the rounds is that OpenAI has been talking to Hollywood about Sora and the Sora tool set as it relates to media. I mean, I would say that I don't think we want vast Hollywood productions to move entirely to AI created pieces, right? But also remember, I think that we have to be very thoughtful about what we decide to criticize in regards to. Let's remember that computer generated graphics have been a really important part of the Hollywood scene for going on 4 decades now. And I think there are good reasons, maybe not to replace an actor with an AI bot or with AI generated images. I'm also a little not super happy with the whole notion of like taking someone who's no longer with us and reconstituting them using an AI model. That seems like that's the wrong direction as well. But I do think that these tools are coming to storytelling near you.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's there's a couple under voice tech. I'll do the Verge one, and then if you want to pick up that other one, OpenAI's voice cloning AI model only needs a 15-second sample to work. And so it's interesting to me that in the artistic community, I don't know how much of this you're reading or hearing. I mean, there's definitely some strong voices saying this is unethical to use at all. Like we should not be, we should not be, doing any kinds of use of the tools to create images, to create scripts. It's just like the whole thing, like everything that it was built on was robbed and stolen, and it's just completely unethical from the get-go. That is a very important perspective. I'm not agreeing entirely with that perspective. But the negotiation of contracts for authors and not just actors and all of these kind of things are pretty important. So we've, I think, said before, like there've been other tools that have come out that said 11 seconds or just a short amount of time. But this is called voice generation. They've been developing it since 2022. This powers the read aloud feature in ChatGPT, and so if you have access to this, which I don't think that the public can just get that yet. You're going to be able to, have a voice that's going to say whatever you want. And you can, unfortunately, you'll be able to grab anybody's voice and make them say whatever you want. So, and the video pieces of those have already been in development, but it just hasn't been quite as easy to do.
Well, and I keep thinking about 20 years ago when I first started getting into distance learning, or what is sometimes referred to as e-learning. E-learning is actually a term that's very common in corporate America because there are a lot of people that create training materials and corporate messaging, around digital learning. And so rapid development e-learning is a term that's borrowed from industry for folks who are instructional designers creating things like training materials for corporations and such. And the ability to create a voice that can narrate a video, for example, that's consistent, that doesn't cost a lot of money to be able to create, could be based on an existing voice, I think is a really extraordinary development. But again, I will say that I've recently reviewed a video that was created by an AI generated video maker, and it was pretty good for 2024 for sure, and how quickly these particular technologies have evolved. But let's not forget that I could definitely tell as an AI generated voice, but also I think that does call into question, how much of that do we want to use, right? What do we want to, do we want all of the materials that we listen to learn from to be generated, voices in AI? And maybe, even as soon as months from now, if not a year or two from now, it could not really make a difference, right? Like the quality will be high enough that it feels very human. You can't tell the difference. But I do think those are the types of questions we should be asking ourselves right now.
We may go a few minutes past, but I'll do a fast kind of smile one, and then maybe we can do our Geeks of the Week. Sure. This one was brought to my attention by a student. And if you want to have a conversation about, copyright and trademarks, this is from January of 2024 from Business Insider. It's called "A wildly popular game dubbed Pokemon with Guns has been forced to deny that its characters are a ripoff." And so we've had some conversations at our class about, copyright and fair use and what can we do. And this is an assignment, but if we were doing this for money. And so this is a pretty, obvious case of somebody doing a ripoff from the Pokemon world. And, Pokemon with Guns is probably not going to be authorized in schools as a, anyway, it's just kind of funny. So copyright and fair use are important topics to continue to talk about. And this is part of what the conversation is with AI, in terms of training data. So anyway, that was just kind of a fun one that I got from middle schoolers. I had not known about Pokemon with Guns. I don't know if you've been playing that regularly, Jason.
The last thing I want to share is that there was an interesting release from MIT last week that I think is worth your time, and it is the beginning of, I think, not beginning, another voice in the conversation regarding AI in schools, and this comes from MIT and some researchers that are there. But I would encourage you to read the article because it starts to put down a kind of a sense of a framework. And I still think that schools shouldn't wait around for a framework, but instead they should be doing this work themselves now, in part because I think having these conversations are important for communities. But I was pretty interested in this article. I think it's pretty well done. And, if you're looking for some external proof of why you should be tackling these challenges in your district and your voice isn't enough, pull in the Massachusetts Institute of Technology and their thinking labs to think about where to go. But I thought this article was pretty insightful and really echoes a lot of the themes that Dr. Fryer and I have been talking about over the last year or so as generative AI has grown.
All right. Well, we probably better wrap it up.
Okay. Well, Dr. Fryer, please share your Geek of the Week.
Okay, well, I've got 3. I have shared my favorite podcast. I think this is also an awesome thing to ask people to do. What are your favorite podcasts right now? So I've done this several times and I updated it, but my top 9 favorite podcasts are there. Angry Planet, Hard Fork, No Dumb Questions, Ezra Klein, Daily, Shifting Ground, Voices from DARPA Today Explained. And this one is one I pay for, but it's about Christian nationalism, which is like kind of getting to be a big deal in our country. And it's called Straight White American Jesus. It's from a professor that's in San Francisco. But I've got mostly all my other subscriptions on there too. Next thing, I actually created this just this week. I have been doing my conspiracies and culture wars project since 2019 and using the moon landing and the folks that say the moon landing is a hoax as a way to talk about conspiracy theories and not be fired from my job. Well, this page basically aggregates about 20 videos that I have used and am using throughout the course of this unit. And it's just, I love these like thumbnails and being able to do that in Google Slides. So, and then I've got a few others. I don't know, maybe you didn't see this, Jason, but Breaking Cinderella Castle Burned to the Ground. that's made the rounds on TikTok recently. And so there's just some really good things. Like I use that actually to juxtapose against the bridge collapse in Baltimore when it happened, like which one is real, and I had some kids vote for Cinderella Castle. But anyway, it's just another example of AI being used for disinformation and why we need a strategy like SIFT to be able to deal with it. And then the last thing, I don't know that I'm going to do this in my neighborhood, but the New York Times had an article, tired of streaming, free Blockbuster libraries offer an alternative. And I don't know if you've got these, Jason, in Montana, but we have these free public libraries, which are just basically a box that someone has in their neighborhood. And you just load up books and get them, just take a book, give a book, whatever. Well, people are doing that with DVDs and VHS tapes. And so they have actually got all these things you can download to paint, make it look like Blockbuster and everything like that, and do that in your neighborhood. So obviously that could increase some traffic in your neighborhood. And if you don't want that, then maybe you don't want one, next to your house. But I thought that was pretty clever. And amidst all of the streaming fees and everything that we need to do, and we've talked about tools for auditing your subscriptions. If you've cut down on your streaming subscriptions, perhaps you can, get one of these Blockbuster, generously share your videos going in your neighborhood.
Excellent. Thank you. And I would like to share a tool that my wife actually bought me a subscription to for my 50th birthday in October. It's called Going, or at going.com. It used to be called Scott's Cheap Flights, and now it's called Going. And it's a really great service that basically you put in your home airport and it sniffs out, and your preferred airlines, and it sniffs out deals for you. And the reason why I mention it is because I am later on this spring going to go on a major trip with my wife. We're going to go to Japan for a couple weeks, and really excited about that. But what's been interesting about since my wife bought me a membership of this for me is that the number of really kind of amazing trips that I have not really would have known about otherwise, I've been able to get some sense of. And so, for example, last week there was tickets on my preferred airline to a town that apparently is a major town in Mexico that I had not heard of before, at the interior of Mexico, for $339 in September of this year. So the deal is gone now, but my wife and I are kind of opening up some weekends to where if we do find deals like this, then we're going to go. So going.com, I think it's $50 a year for a membership, and that's a pretty great, I think, a pretty great opportunity.
And speaking of which, you're taking a trip to Europe where we're going to do some live, but is that the summer? When does that happen?
No, it's Europe. It's just Japan.
It's Japan. That's right.
And so we, and my plan is, if we can pull it off, is to do at least one episode of the EdTech Situation Room International.
But that'll be, what month is that going to be?
I leave in a couple weeks, and then I'm back in mid-May. So.
Oh, okay. So it'll be coming up. All right. So folks, stay tuned.
Yeah, sounds great. Well, Dr. Fryer, where can people find you on the internet?
I am at wesfryer.com. How about you?
I am at aicentrist.com, and this here is the EdTech Situation Room. We're once a week podcast on Wednesday nights at 7 p.m. Mountain Time, 9 p.m. Eastern Time, sometime in the middle of the night, UTC. We hope you'll join us live. We have folks that hang out in our chat room via YouTube and Facebook, and we would more than encourage you to do so. If not, you can always find our podcast wherever finer podcasts are aggregated, and most importantly, you can find all of our past episodes on both YouTube and Facebook as we broadcast in both those locations. We hope you have a great week. Stay safe, stay savvy, and we hope to see you next time on the EdTech Situation Room. Good night.
Keep using that password manager, ladies and gentlemen.